Welcome to another episode of Esoterica the podcast. I'm your host, Chris Schultz, and with me today is the incomparable Molly Harvey. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled. A longtime Residence fan, so it's a huge thrill to have you here today. First question, and we like to ask all our guests because we're hoping to get down in the posterity here. How has the pandemic been impacting your life?
How's it been impacting me?
Yeah.
Sorry. I had to move a few months ago, so that was a bit of a headache. But it turned out to be a fortunate move. But I wasn't thrilled to have to look for a place, mid-pandemic before vaccinations came out and all that. And I guess just like everyone else, there was a lot of fear at the beginning, a lot of dreams about really mundane things like they say when you die, you see your life events sort of go on. And I was having these dreams just about in middle school and stuff like that. Why did I care about wearing a bikini to the beach? It just put so much in perspective really quickly about sort of silly concerns that I guess I had long ago. But it's so hard to remember. I don't know if you've been through this, but you sort of try to review the year with people and it's like, was that a year ago? Has it been 2 years? Like, how long has this even been happening?
I know. I keep saying we're on March
I live
400.
in Atlanta. Yeah, right. Somebody was like, this is the longest January 2020 ever, know? So I live in Atlanta, and there was also, Georgia is just a very weird state. So our governor sort of opened things back up 2 months into the pandemic. He's like, bowling alleys are open and, go get your nails done. And so in some ways, visually, aside from everyone wearing masks, it didn't really look like it changed because there were still, the parking lots were full of cars and stuff like that. But I isolated pretty hard. I mean, I'm kind of an introvert anyway. But it was just a big old mind F, And the reason I mentioned Atlanta is because we also had a lot of protesting and a lot of violence from police against citizens that this summer, there was a man shot and killed by police. And that resulted in us having curfews and stuff like that, where we weren't allowed, in addition to the pandemic, we weren't allowed to go out at night. Not that I would have anyway, but there was just, fear on top of fear, and a lot of unrest here. So it's been heavy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it also makes you really thankful. Thankfully I made it through, didn't get sick. No one I'm super close to got really sick. So I consider myself really fortunate in that way.
Well, it's good to hear. It's been a funny thing. I know personally, I was out of work for 10 months, and that's when we started reaching out to try to interview people for our podcast. So I really can't complain. I got to talk to Homer Flynn, talk to Blixa just the other week, and now
wow,
you. So it's, some good things come out of it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think for a lot of us, I guess really for all of us to different degrees, it forced us to think about what is really important to us or what we want to do. And I know for me, I haven't been performing really regularly for years and years and years. And there was something about, like I said, I'm an introvert anyway, but something about just knowing that you couldn't go out, that there was nothing to go out too. And the future was so, and still is, sort of so mysterious that for me, it really made me kind of realize how much I like singing, which is funny, sort of like with no ability to go out and do it. It sort of made me remember like why I like to sing anyway, which is sort of like getting those emotions out. So I guess creatively, it was a good thing. And I've talked to other people. I don't know if Homer said this, but we had chatted. Our birthdays are real close together, so we usually have a phone call around our birthdays. And he was saying, for a lot of creative people, this is kind of like been a blessing in a way, because it just allows you to kind of yeah. But anyway, I'm in a pretty good place, but I definitely had a few really rough months, like, being out of work and having to move and all that stuff was kind of rough. But anyway, it's all good now. As good as it can be.
Yeah, as good as it can be. It's another day. We're still here. We're talking. That's good.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a good segue. I'm going to start off asking you about your time with the residents with a question I'm sure you've answered 1,000 times before, but it's always fun to hear it from the source.
Sure.
How exactly did you come across meeting the residents?
Completely randomly and by chance. I was 21. I had recently graduated from college. And I had studied theater. I had studied acting. I went to like a school for the arts in high school and then studied acting in college. So I was really pretty thinking that I was going to go into doing live theater. And my dad got sick and quickly died from cancer. And he lived out in California. And so I ended up in San Francisco, and got a job, literally got the first job that I found, which was this old school coffee shop where, they still served like really bad macaroni salad and like bad coffee in styrofoam cups. I mean, it was not hipstery at all. It mostly served cops and people that worked for AT&T. It was South of Market, which now is very different, but back then it was very kind of working class. And my first day there, one of the guys from the residence came in, and, of course I had no idea who he was. But little by little, we developed a friendship. And because I was a thespian, I always would sort of talk in weird little voices and do characters, really just to kind of keep myself amused at this like shitty coffee shop job. And I actually, I think it was Lee Barbier. Do you know who that is? She's a wonderful artist in her own, wonderful artist. And she's married to Homer, of the Cryptic Corporation. And her background is in scenic painting. And so I mentioned to her that I was an actor. Mm-hmm. And I think she's really the reason that I ended up doing stuff with them, because she had mentioned to one of them, Molly's an actor. And it really just happened like that. It was super organic, where one day one of them came in and I was super jacked up on bad coffee. And, and I just said like, hey, I can do voices. You want to give me a job? And they was like, yeah, well, we're doing this CD-ROM. Can you do an old lady voice? And I was like, yeah, definitely. And he goes, okay, well, make me a demo. And I was like, all right. Well, back then I had like a boombox and a cassette tape, and I've never been a big drinker, but that night I drank like a 40 ounce of beer and tried to make some kind of demo. I never did give them the demo because it was like just me, going, hey, but basically, the Cryptic Corporation happened to be about 3 doors down from the coffee shop. So those guys would come in every day for their afternoon coffee. And that's how it happened. We just became friends. And it probably helped that I was not a fan. I mean, I knew who they were.
Mhm.
And I knew of their sort of place in music history, or, you know, I knew that they were sort of like this important underground band. But because I wasn't personally a huge fan, I mean, if I were a huge fan, I'd be like, I'm terrible, you know, like I wouldn't have been able to be like, you know, sort of offhand and silly and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I never gave him the demo. And then finally one of them was just like, well, why don't you come in and we'll see, like, we'll try to record you. And, you know, it was sort of like an audition where they just recorded me doing the voice of the old lady for Gingerbread Man, which was a CD-ROM they made in like 1994, 95. And so I did that voice. And I think because I'd had theater training, I understood how to do things quickly and not sort of hem and haw. And they liked that. I remember one of them said, "You work fast," and I like that, you know? So it was, I really think it's sort of as simple as that, where it was like, I was good enough. And concurrently, I started working for Ralph America, which used to be Ralph Records, which was run by Sarah McLennan, who had been one of their dancers. And she had become a mom. And so, you know, I thought she was so old at the time. She was like 36. And I was like, oh, this lady, I mean, she's cool, but she's kind of old, you know? And so I worked for Ralph part-time, folding t-shirts, filling orders. But because they shared a physical space, I was just around a lot, doing this job for Ralph. And you know, it was really just kind of that. It's like they saw my face almost every day. We developed a personal relationship. And then, you know, back then, I think Snakefinger had passed away a few years before, and they were sort of in this transitional phase where it's like, well, what are we going to do next? And they got an offer to do a show in Germany that Marlboro sponsored.
Of all
the Marlboro Eyeball Experience. And so that was my first, like.
Yep, I am. Sorry, my internet.
Okay, that's okay. You can hear me though? Sorry, I was like, I don't know. I told my friend, I'm like, I'm going to be a grandma on this thing. I've never Zoomed before. But did you hear what I was saying about the Fillmore stuff?
I think we're just talking about the show in Germany.
Okay, so it did cut out.
Yep. Yeah. It did.
Okay. Okay. I just didn't. I wasn't sure if I should keep talking. So basically, we did Germany. I think that was maybe 1996 or something like that. And then they got an offer from the Fillmore to do like 3 or 4 nights around Halloween with 2 shows, like basically culminating with a midnight show on Halloween. And I remember one of them was like, and we're going to do it and you're going to sing. And I was kind of like, what? I am? Are you sure? Because I'm not a trained singer. I've never, ever been in a band. You know, I never really had any aspirations to do that. But I kind of felt like, well, shit, if these guys have confidence in me, then of course I'll do it, you know? And so that's how it started. Wow. First stint in a band was at the Fillmore. No big deal.
Yeah, right. Let's start small.
Yeah. So, and I really think the only way I was able to get through it was because I was masked, and it created this, you know how for dogs, when they're scared in a thunderstorm, they have those like weighted blankets that they, you know, like it's kind of like I had a weighted blanket on because I was so covered, you know, I had a costume on, I had a mask on, I couldn't really see that much. And so it sort of allowed me to almost disassociate a little bit and sort of like pretend there wasn't an audience. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so that I can't imagine just going out and being, you know, like the sexy girl singer in a band for the first time, or the the wacky lady, so I just was sort of like, felt like a marionette or something, where I was like, just keep singing, just get through it. And it worked,
And 10 years on, you were still with them.
That like, yeah.
So one question I had, so with the Residents, like most of their albums are stories. And you have definite characters that you brought to life. How much of those characters was your contribution versus, singing a role that somebody had written?
Well, everything that I did was absolutely written by them. I didn't, I mean, like this, like I think the first character that I sang as at the Fillmore was Lottie the Log Lady from Bad Day on the Midway. And I had voiced her for Bad Day on the Midway, but, in terms of content, it's 100% them. It's like, I never wrote a single word or anything like that. But as far as voices, those were mine. I mean, and they would give me direction if they didn't like what I was doing. But I probably have a handful of, I don't know, 5 different voices that I do. I don't think I have like the hugest range, but I do what I do. And it just kind of worked for what they had going on. And yeah, I don't know if I answered that.
yeah, that's I wasn't sure how much was Molly versus what they had conceived.
Well, yeah, I mean the amount of ground and thought and
I apologize, that was my internet dropping out again.
That's okay. At first I was like, wow, he doesn't blink. He is.
And they've never had this problem before. All of a sudden it's going haywire today. I don't know.
Oh man. Well, I get that. I live down, I'm in a shared house and I live downstairs and I have to come upstairs because it wouldn't work down there. So I get it. But anyway, yeah, they come up with obviously the music, the characters, and then I guess I sort of look at it as like just a weird chance encounter that happened to really be a good fit for both of us. I mean, me and them as a whole. So, but I really did.
You definitely brought a much needed, feminine energy to the band, which I think is good. Like my wife's not a big fan of the Residents, but she gets what they're doing and she tolerates me with my obsessions. But like one of the things I've heard her say, it's a very male, almost, I to use her word, masturbatory music, in the sense that they're just chasing after their own pleasure. So you brought a different energy to that, which I think was really definitely vital for the body of work during that time. Like I was listening to Demons Dance Alone today, and like some of the strongest songs on there are definitely yours.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's definitely, I hear that what has changed now, because of course I don't tour with them anymore, but I hear that there are a lot more young women fans, but I can tell you for sure, and I think that it's on video for this Disfigured Night, which was the thing we did for Marlboro in Germany. They filmed it and it was like, guys sitting there, looking intently, and their girlfriends, like, nobody had cell phones back then, but I mean, if they had cell phones, they would have been like scrolling. Some of the girlfriends were like rolling their eyes or falling asleep. So yeah, for sure. It's historically it's spoken to males more. Although, I worked for Ralph for a long time. That I think I started in 1994. And there have always been female Residents fans. They're not as many of them, but that was one beautiful thing about working for Ralph, is that really I got to know a lot of the big fans because I would, orders were not done by internet. They were done by either mailing a letter or calling us on the phone. So I got to know a good handful of fans over the years.
Yeah, and it's a very passionate fan base. That must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, very, yeah. And I got to learn about their music from that perspective, because like I said, I didn't know any of their work. And I think I knew about like Eskimo, or Meet the Residents, but it's not like anything I had put on or bought. And so I really came to appreciate their music really through the fans, which was kind of cool, talking to them about music and all kinds of music. I mean, but that was a very cool aspect of what I did,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Any favorite songs? Anything that you look back at that stick out more than others?
In terms of just the Residents' body of work, or do you mean things that I've done?
I mainly yours, but if there's a Residents album or a song that you really love, I'd love to hear about that.
Well, I sometimes when I'm really feeling sad, I'll just think about Mahogany Wood. I just love that song. I just think that's just such a gorgeous song. And it's just that sentiment that we can probably all relate to, of like wishing you were different, or, wishing that there was something about you that was different. But I love a lot of their work now. I mean, and in terms of stuff I've done, it's real different now because, gosh, I mean, it's been, I think 2005 was the last tour I did with them. So it's been years and years. And one thing that I can look back on now, like I can look back at like a YouTube video and be like, I can say I'm proud of that. But at the time I was terrified and thought I was horrible, is Man's World. It was such an intimidating song for a few reasons, one, because it's just such an iconic song and there's so much space in it. There's not, it's not a song that really, I mean, at least the way I did it, there wasn't, and the way that they composed it and stuff, there was so much space that it scared the hell out of me every time I had to do it. And there was so much self-loathing going on during, when I would sing that song, where I'm like, oh my God, I suck. This is, oh God, and one thing about them is they don't give a lot of feedback. Like you wouldn't hear like, you did a great job, or like, I really like what you're doing. You would kind of only hear like if there was a problem. And that, you learn really quickly, like, all right, I guess I'm doing okay because nobody's told me to like do it differently. But it was also weird because I was never sure if I was like, am I doing okay? But then they'd ask me back for something else. So I was like, all right, I guess.
All right.
Yeah, I must be doing okay. But now, 16 years or however long it's been, looking back, I'm like, all right, that was okay. I did better than I thought.
I'm glad you mentioned that song, because whenever I'm explaining to somebody about the Residents and how they cover songs, I usually use Man's World as an example, because I'm sure when James Brown wrote that song, he meant it sincerely and complimentary, and the Residents record it in such a way, it's an unironic approach to it that really brings out how misogynistic that song is. When you do it, it's a whole nother level. Like so you might have been self-loathing and fearful when you're doing it, but let me tell you, it just drills right into you. I was listening to that this morning on the way into work, and it blows me away every single time.
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, yeah, that's one thing, because it's been so long, I can look back with like pride at that and be like, that was cool, I can say, I know you didn't exactly ask this, but in terms of like there's a real difference in the experience of recording a song in a studio and then the live experience of like singing the song. And it's been so long that there are seriously some songs that I've probably even forgotten that I sang, or I can't remember the name of. But I will say that my favorite moments on stage were always singing with the singer, the male lead singer during Wormwood. That was probably, and maybe partly it was because it was my first time touring and it was all so new, but there were times on stage, like his energy is so incredible that, and I really can't even remember the name of the song. It might be Dinah and the Unclean Skin, but it, like, we would be singing together on stage and I was terrified of him. I mean, but in a good way, you know, like in character, terrified. And it was truly thrilling, you know, because it wasn't, I guess that's sort of the beauty of live music versus theater, where everything is kind of like, you know, you say your line and then I will say mine and I will cross here. I mean, we obviously did rehearse a whole bunch and have choreography to some extent and all that, so that the lighting guy knew like where we were going to move. But that raw power in the heat of the moment, still, I'm like, damn, you know, I mean, I have goosebumps thinking about it, because that interaction was thrilling and really cool.
Oh, I can imagine. I remember seeing, and this was later residents. I saw the Bunny Boy tour, and the venue that we were in was very small. So like I was maybe 5 or 10 feet away from the stage, and I legit like had hair raising up on the back of my neck. That the singing resident like was scary.
Yes, it's amazing. I mean, and it's a whole different thing. I mean, I don't know, obviously, like what your musical taste is beyond the residents, but I know for me, like going to like punk rock shows as a teen and a young adult, or like seeing, you know, heavier bands where there was like a lot of aggression. It's like, I love that too. I mean, that always sort of scared me. It wasn't like I was a punker, but I liked that, you know, but I would like be standing in the back. But I think the thing that was so cool with the residents is they were doing this music that was not necessarily overtly super aggressive, but it was just so intense.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's really hard to gauge how the audience is feeling, because, you know, sometimes we would play theaters where people would be sitting, and when people are sitting, they tend to be better behaved and a lot quieter. Yeah. Than if it's in a club where everybody's standing, you know. I mean, I remember doing Burn Baby Burn, which is like such a, you know, God Digs My Daddy, you know, so quiet. And there's some guy going, show us your tits. And I'm like, sir, you know, like, oh my God, you know, that's in a stand-up club. But what I loved about it was that, you know, sometimes the audiences would be absolutely silent and you're kind of like, are they liking this? Are we losing them? But it usually, I mean, I'm sure there were some people that hated the show, that, you know, whatever, but usually it was that they were so in it that it was like, there was nothing else going on. And that was really cool.
Yeah, I've felt that. I've been to shows, like I saw Icky, the first time I saw the Residents was Icky Flicks, and that was in a theater, and it was like everybody was sitting. It was a little more subdued. I've been to other shows where it's been a little crazy, but like, I mean, whenever I introduce Homer, I introduce him as the manager of the art collective known as the Residents, because it does seem more like theater than just straight rock and roll band.
For sure. Yeah.
And I'll have to say, for the record, Burn Baby Burn is, if I had to list like my top 5 favorite Resident songs, that's at like number 3.
Wow. That's nice.
Love that too.
That's another one where I was always, I mean, I guess I was just always a little like freaked out, you know, performing. Another thing is that, I was 20, when I met him. So I was really still very young when I was performing live with them. And it was always hard to, it was almost hard to accept the applause, because in my mind, I'm like, well, it's the residents, it's not me. Like, I didn't get us here. You know, I'm not the reason that people are clapping. I just am lucky enough to be part of this band right now that is so loved that, you know, so I don't know. I mean, also it being an anonymous band, I mean, really back then, even though my name was used on records, we didn't have social media. You know, you could be, and we would often, not the whole band, but most of the youngins in the band, we would always be out in the crowd before a show, you know, before we had to put our costumes on. And then we'd come out afterwards and everybody was sweaty. So it's not like we stood out as being anybody special, which was really cool. But it was also really strange because you never got any feedback, you know, and as a performer, it's like, it's something that performers tend to need or thrive on, is like, good, you know, I'm holding my phone, so I have to do the, you know, clapping on my knee, but like, yay, good, yes, good, you know. And so there was a lot of like, yeah, I was so unconfident that I was like, I'm just gonna get out here and do, you know, do my best and hope it's okay. Yeah. Anyways.
Well, I belong to a couple of residents forums on Facebook and whatnot, and everybody always talks about how much they love Molly. So you made an impression.
Oh, that's so nice. That's very sweet.
And I know anytime the band swings through Georgia, there's always that whole, you know, there's a lot of anticipation, hoping that we'll get to see you on stage.
Oh, yeah, I usually do like one song with them when they come to Atlanta.
I have to make a trip. I'm up in Boston. I'm hoping to catch them with their rescheduled show. I think everything's been pushed to 2022 at this point.
Really?
You know, actually maybe it's August that they're coming around of this.
That's what I thought. I mean, obviously everything is subject to change, but my impression was that it's pushed to like late summer, early fall.
Actually, you know what? You're right, because it's September.
Yeah.
I think it was originally May, and then we just actually today got clearance for people to sing on indoor venues. So
yeah,
I think September. So hopefully we'll be catching them.
Right. And of course it all could change, but hopefully like these vaccines will work and we'll continue to, you know.
Yep, the country will stop eating itself alive and we can get back to life as it was.
Yeah.
So speaking of life as it was, do you have anything going on now? Any projects or?
Yeah, you know, it's sort of like I was saying that, I mean, for years, you know, I have a almost 13-year-old son, and I moved to Georgia for a relationship and stuff. So I was sort of doing family things for years and years. But, you know, now my son's older, and the marriage didn't last, but that's okay. You know, it taught me a lot. But for years, it was just like not on my radar at all to do anything. I mean, I would occasionally do like a show in Atlanta with like a local musician. But the main takeaway for me from the pandemic was like, man, I really like to sing. And I really am interested in doing that again. And I think with the residents, you know, what they have now is working for them. So I don't anticipate that I'll be like back doing anything like really touring with them. But in the past few months, I've actually started doing a few more things. And I have a note here just because I can't quite remember, but there's a guy named Alex Roten, Wroten, who's a filmmaker and a composer out in LA. And he contacted me a few weeks ago, and he's putting together an audio only sort of rock opera, although it's not rock, but for lack of a better word. And he's sort of collecting, he actually has just finished a Ronaldo and the Loaf documentary. And so I can't say everybody who's going to be a part of it, but I know like Brian Poole from Ronaldo and the Loaf's going to be in it. Bob Drake from Thinking Plague, Elaine DeFalco, who's been in a ton of bands. I mean, so has Bob Drake, but like Thinking Plague is probably the one that people would recognize. And then some other folks that seem pretty exciting, but he's not quite, like, it's not 100%. We're all going to be part of this original rock opera that this guy is doing. And so he actually just sent me some stuff a few days ago. So that should come out maybe the end of the year or something like that. So we'll all be doing it remotely, but he kind of wants to get what he called like, you know, like sort of like a weirdo musical super group together. So he's kind of like reaching out to people, sort of fringe musicians that he likes. So that's one thing I'm doing. And if you're curious about him, he has a thing called Well Dang Productions. So it's welldang.com if you're interested to, you know, kind of see what his background is and all that. And one of the fortunate things about me losing my place that I lived is that, and the beauty of social media is that I sort of put something out online. I was like, hey, I'm losing my place. If anybody, you know, knows a place. And I was really desperate, where it's like, I really probably would have moved in with anybody, but it just so happened that, I moved in with this guy who has a studio in the basement and is a musician and an artist. And he's just great. We've, you know, hit it off as housemates and stuff. And so we're working on, like, it just sort of came to both of us where we're like, why don't we do something? Like, you know, you got this basement full of stuff. So, so we're working on sort of character, you know, kind of the stuff I do, like character-based sort of silly stuff. And we're hoping to have something done by June, like at least get one song done and out into the world. But he has a band called Cave Bat that I don't think the music we're doing is going to exactly be like that, but just if, you know, if you're curious or anyone's curious. So yeah, I have those two sort of like little irons in the fire. And then I've been talking to another friend online who's a musician, sort of same thing, where he's like, well, let's us do actually two different friends. So I'm like a little musical slut right now. I'm just talking to everybody. And, but I'm interested, you know, it's fun because it's like, you know, yeah. So I don't have any particular like website that I can lead you to, but I'm sort of like getting back into that world of at least performing remotely or at least recording.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. That's right. I've been in like mommy mode for like 13 years. So, you know, and actually I did, I have one, my memory's so bad, but I did put out something on Psychophone Records out of Germany with my good buddy Ostrich von Nipple. We had a little band called Harvey and Nipple, and not even a band. It was literally like, he's my buddy. We were farting around recording at his house. He was teaching me how to use I'm sorry, I'm so technically dumb. He was teaching me how to use a thing where you move button, like basically a vocal processor, where he's like, I think you'd have fun with this. So we farted around one day at his house, and then 17 months, I mean, and never meant to like put it out, but like 17 months later, he like pulled it out and was like, you know, this stuff's actually not bad. So that ended up being a little single that we put out on Psychophone. Mm-hmm. So I've done like little things over the last few years, but mostly my talk about like mommy mode, my focus for the past many years has been fabric art and like making quilts and drawing and just doing things that you can do when you have a little kid who falls asleep at 7 o'clock, you know. So when you can't go out and perform. So that's been my focus for a long time, is more just visual stuff. But yeah, we'll see what happens with the world. But I'm excited to perform in the future and to kind of do stuff that's a little more happy, maybe silly, joyful.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing. I mean, I think your wife is right, where I have a million tons of respect for the residents, and I'll always be so grateful for the experiences and the years performing with them. But one thing that I realized is, especially with Wormwood, it's like when you sing songs about like heinous shit happening to you or being a victim, it starts to bum you out. You know, it's like this, it starts to wear on you. And so I'm more interested in doing stuff that is less dark. I'm not really a songwriter. You know, I've never really tried my hand at it. Most of the stuff I do or have done with friends is more improvised, where it's like, you know, silly ladies who then sort of like morph into something else. So we'll see what happens, but.
Oh, awesome. Something to look forward to.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, Molly, thank you. I told you my email 20 or 30 minutes and I've taken about an hour of your time. So I want to thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today.
For sure. You're